Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here and for being a part of this very important conversation with our national expert in athletic performance and overall well-being with Mr. John Underwood. My name's Andrea Salazar, and I'm the Youth Prevention Associate Director with the San Antonio Council on Alcohol and Drug Awareness, or we're also known as CICADA. CICADA has worked with the Bernie ISD community and school district for the past few years, and we're very excited that tonight's event involves Bernie ISD and the community as a whole. Before I introduce Mr. Underwood, I'd like to thank the Community Foundation of the Texas Hill Country, whose grant funds are making tonight's presentation possible. I also would like to thank the PTOs from Samuel Champion High School and Bernie High School for their partnership and their generosity with tonight's event. And a very special thank you to Bernie ISD for supporting CICADA's prevention programming in the Hill Country for the last 3 years. Lastly, I'd like to thank you parents and community members for being here and for everyone watching via live stream. And now, I'd like to introduce our speaker. Mr. John Underwood is the director and founder of the Human Performance Project. He's a former NCAA All-American coach, advisor of 24 Olympians, guest commentator for ABC's Worldwide Sports, and a consultant to major sports federations like the NCAA, NHL, and international and U.S. Olympic committees. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Underwood.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks so much. We spent today at one of your high schools, and we talked to over 1,000 kids, and it wasn't just for athletes, although we have specific programs just for athletes. We did this for the whole student body, so that was 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. And tonight, in this session, we were going to talk, to really give you a perspective of like what the program is about, what it can do, what it can add to the school district, and community. And that's I see we have parents here. We certainly have, I hope, parents live streaming it. We have probably some coaches and some student athletes even here tonight, and also some school administrators and teachers. So this program tonight, I sort of took what we showed today, and I just want to take my time because I showed so much in the short time we had at school, about an hour. I want to take the time to explain it so that people can see, hopefully, the merit of going down this road to give kids the best information to make the best choices. And to be honest with you, I think that's the purpose of what we need to do for young people nowadays. Give them the best information to make the best choices. To be honest with you, we're still at the mercy of people making those choices. And from adult perspective, that's a whole different perspective than the perspective of kids, because they're not in the same place in their development. So anyway, I just want to give you a background. I spent a lot of time in my education for human performance in Europe, and was actually the first foreign student at the Sport Institute of Finland. And it was a really special place to learn, because it was one of the best think tanks for human performance and physiology in the world. And I was going to work with elite athletes, and I came back in the late 80s and ended up they had just opened the Olympic Training Center in Lake Placid. And Lake Placid is in the northernmost part of New York and hosted the Olympics twice. And so I went to work there and with athletes and coaches and mostly winter athletes at that time, but now it's for all different sports. And I went to work doing scientific studies and physiological tests on athletes for performance, and I also did a lot of the education. And the topics for education were everything from nutrition to recovery to the best things we knew at that point in time, and we certainly know a lot more now. But it was a good life. That was the first 20 years of my career. I've now been working for 42 years, so this is 22 years on my own with Human Performance Project, but it was preceded by 20 years in this with Olympic sport. And I coached. I actually had 28 Olympians that I worked with, coached or advised, and it was 7 different sports, which is a little bit different from people who coach a sport. And so I enjoyed that life, and it was interesting. And I said today when I was talking to some of the kids, and we're at another high school tomorrow, same thing, full student body. I had 4 years to help athletes get ready for one day. That's a neat project by itself. And I also said to those young people today, you know, the more time you spend, the better you get, that's for sure. And there's a statement down here at the bottom by a famous Russian, the father of Russian sport, Matveyev. He said, the single biggest factor in development is time. And there's a million ways you can spin that. You can spin it that you run out of time and the day comes that you have to perform, or you waste your time, or a million other scenarios. So I often, when I talk to young people, I try to make them realize, even though you're young and you think you got all this time, you're going to run out of time. And that's a good perspective to have. So another thing that we did is this year, rather than just go to a school and make a presentation and then you go away and just, you know, maybe somebody remembers something from it, you hope. We actually made a program called Project 1440. There's 1,440 minutes in a day, and we give sound bites to schools. So everything from morning announcements, you might have one on you know, sleep, nutrition, pot, alcohol, stress, all these different topics we've delved into. And you know, maybe somebody hears something and it's a reminder or a wake-up call, or they say, oh, you know, really, wow, I can't believe that's true. But it helps them maybe have a new way to think about what they do. And actually this statement I always try to drop on not just student athletes but anybody is every day matters and counts sooner or later. And I think that's a good place to start for this session. You might not be able to see this in the picture. Hopefully you can. It says time equals life, and you know, if you really think about it, if you waste your time, you do waste your life. And I'm not trying to pick on your generation because we have some young people here, but man, I'll tell you, the amount of things that you kids burn through that have no payback or payout is pretty hard to imagine. And I'll give a reference to that because I've had 5 kids of my own. Man, there are so many distractions to staying focused and staying on a project and being motivated to see it through because you run out of time. And I can't believe the amount of things that you kids juggle and keep going. It's a challenge anyway. So anyway, that's something. And I think this is one of our posters for athletes. And I think you can see here it's, you know, eventually the clock winds down. Maybe something you cared about or wanted to do or achieve or planned or invested in, time, effort, and energy, and all of a sudden the day comes. And on that day, you got to go in with how you've prepared. And a lot of times you wish, oh man, I should have put in more time doing this or doing it better, but the day comes. And at that point in time, maybe you start to realize every day mattered and every day counted. And I think that's something that we really need to spend more time on. You can't just go in and wing it. It's probably not going to always come out in your favor. So anyway, the time you take to prepare is important. I also said if you want to see about time, this is probably the 2 greatest examples of time. Couple Olympics ago, the men's downhill and men's Olympic downhill. First gold medal to 10th place was separated by 57 hundredths of a second. So a lot of times I speak, and I once was speaking and there was a guy and he had the finish of the 100-meter dash and he had a sound for each person crossing the finish line, which was sort of neat. And it sounded like one sound, but this would be the same way, first through 10th. They say that if you want to see what 57 hundredths of a second is, they say close your eyes and open them back up. That's about 57 hundredths of a second. That's the difference between the winner and, you know, who remembers 10th. Maybe the guy that was 10th. So here's another one. This is track cycling. This is 1,000th of a second separating a gold and a silver medal. I have a whole bunch of examples of this from maybe 15 sports. And when I talk to athletes, I show them all because it's sort of a neat reference. But what's the difference? So maybe something somebody did that the other person didn't do. Maybe an extra hour's sleep. I'm not kidding you, because we've started to really quantify what are some of those fraction of a percent things that matter and count on that day when you're going to do the thing so that you're not 10th. All right, so that's something to think about. But we have now taken and we have access to these think tanks and physiological centers and training centers worldwide. We meet with this group called ASPC. It's the Association of High Performance Training Centers of the World. I've spoken there many times. And what we do is we take mental and physical performance studies and we say, you know, this isn't just for athletes. This is for anybody. This will cross any barriers, music, art, dance, you name it, and academics for sure. So why don't we take this and show everybody, and then have specific programs for athletes too. So we've published some stuff. here's just some of those publications, and we keep them short. Most of them are around 20 pages. You know, you give somebody a book and maybe they'll, you know, flip a few pages and read some of the stuff, but you make them about 20 pages long, and you actually, you know, it's, you know, as a coach, I used to tell athletes, you know, hey, I'm going to help you, but you need to read these things and understand them, especially the ones on diet and sleep. I can honestly say this: you want to see the country the worst with those two topics, you're in it. Probably, you know, in modernized nations, there's only, I think, one country that sleeps less than we do, and that's Japan. We actually know that they came in at like 5 hours and 45 minutes of sleep, and as far as diet, you know, we're way near the bottom, folks. Athletes can't perform if you don't take care of all of them. And our new manual is this mental wellness manual. You know, 1 out of 5 kids that are in those middle school, high school ages now have mental health related issues. And you know, when do we get on that page? We need to be on that page, you know, chronically. So we also do coaches super clinics to educate coaches. And we have an amazing leadership program that's run by former Navy SEALs, and it's as far as I'm concerned, it's as good as it gets. Who uses our program? Lots of people. We've been to hundreds of colleges, mostly the major colleges. Just some examples of the project. We work with 3 professional sport leagues. Been to a lot of those programs over the years. And we have worked with Super Bowl champion teams that came from near the bottom to the top in a couple of years, and teams that never won that won. I mean, you start thinking, okay, why do people seek out this information? Because if you add science to performance, everything starts to go up. And I don't care, again, what venue that is. We also have done programs outside of the sport world. Actually spent a significant amount of time helping set up the Navy SEAL Human Performance Project, and it's still called that to this day, HPP, just like our organization name. As far as I'm concerned, that's the most important thing that I ever did in my life, was to become involved with that and to work with some amazing people to make those guys the greatest fighting force and warriors on the planet Earth. So we built laboratories on both coasts for SEALs to do scientific studies. It went scientific. I guess I can say this, I've said it to lots of people. Before that, it was like a testosterone contest. It wasn't really training. And the longevity of Navy SEAL operators was a pretty short thing. A lot of guys with injuries and syndromes. And you know, now you know, that is an amazing program. So anyway, that's a picture of the lab. And when you start thinking about how good they are at what they do, it's got a lot to do with what they are and who they are and their chemistry and their brain and bodies. But also, it's spun off now to projects in lots of different countries too, and that's what we do. So that's some of it. We did a short stint with Top Gun, which was a neat project. And but now we educate. And if you think about educating, this is in Nebraska. This picture I remember. I'm not specifically sure where it was, but when you educate young people, if they don't know, they don't know. But once they know, you hope that maybe they'll consider the way they're doing things or making some changes. And this was actually a day where they bus kids in from a lot of those rural school districts, and they didn't have enough seats in their gym. So sort of looked like this day. We did 2 sessions that filled your auditorium today. So here's just a title page of our program. We've looked into all these different things that affect performance. Everything from energy drinks, sleep, nutrition, pot, alcohol, stress, you name it. And tried to really give people some good information and sound bites on how they can do what they do better. And I actually said today, you know, when I go into a place, we send all these topics, and we hope that, you know, they'll pick what they want so we can deliver what you want. And you know, brain science and stress and sleep and alcohol, marijuana, prescription drugs and vaping is what was you know, I discussed with your people who set up the program. And then I said, okay, let's talk about talents too, and also about performance. So that's what we're going to see tonight. And if you look at the Human Genome Project, all right, I can say this without any question: everybody has something that they could be good at. I'm not going to say everybody could have something they could be great at, but I'm going to say everybody has something they could be good at. And certainly talent, if you look at 1% populations like Navy SEALs and pro athletes and Olympians and top musicians and artists and dancers, okay, they got something special. But let me describe it for you. But then if you have those talents, you also have to invest in them. And I don't know if it's wise to put poker chips on a slide with the gambling issues and addictions we have nowadays, but I just thought, there comes a time in your life, and hopefully not when you're 10 years old, where you got to put your poker chips on red or black, where you say, hey, I'm pretty good at this, and I think I'm going to invest in it and put more effort into it. And you have to sometimes make these decisions. And I look at, I think we could spend a whole night talking about youth sport and, doing that too early, and, maybe, having a kid end up in something where, it would have been much wiser to go in a different direction. And so we could talk about that, but you do have to invest. And, what you have to work with is what you have to work with. And if you look at those genetic studies that go back grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, somebody will throw you a gene that maybe you have the possibility to be good in something where not everybody is good. Art, music, sports, right? Body type alone, right? I mean, maybe just, maybe you're born and you're 6'6", and, you end up the coach's team being a basketball player, and maybe you want to do something, but you just don't have the genetic predisposition for it to even take place. But realize this, some of these things are a gift and some are a limiting factor. Maybe you got thrown that magic gene that you just have the wiring for music or the creativity for these things, and you end up being not just good at something, but amazing at it. That happens too. So just let me give you some ideas. It's believed, and this is shared often with these studies they've done on Olympians, and especially medalists, because they're different than an Olympian. There's lots of Olympians, but there's these rare people that win gold medals. And what they found is that if you want to look at any walk of life, music, art, dance, sports, all those things, you could take 100 kids. And out of that 100 kids, probably 8 out of 100 could maybe be some kind of a good, not just a good athlete, but a great athlete. So I'll give you a scenario. You have a school, and a magic class will come through, and there's not just 8 kids in that class, that freshman or sophomore or junior class that are amazing athletes. There might be a mix of 20, 25, 30, and you may have some years where you win some stuff. And there's going to be other years where you may wonder where the 8 are. All right? It's a terrible thing to say, but I'm just saying, in the human population, believe me, there's people who have talent for all these different walks of life. And if we're in youth venues, we're adults, I'm a teacher, I'm a coach, I'm in any youth venue, my goal is to help the kids find that. That's what they got to work with. It's my goal to help them find it and encourage them to nurture it, as it is if we're a parent. And I think that's the best gift we have for our kids, is help them find something they're good at, but also help them find something that they have a passion for, that they love. And that it's their desire and their wish. So maybe 8 out of 100 people, or 1 out of 13 people have something where they could be amazing, not just good. But that's not going to take you there. Every adult watching this on live stream or here tonight could tell you 100 stories of somebody who had amazing talents and did nothing with it, or threw it away, or didn't care, or washed it away, or got caught up in some negative stuff that ruined it. That's just the way it is. And that's one of the sad and tragic things about life, is that here you had this thing that you could have done or been, and it didn't pan out. So talent isn't enough, and it's not going to take you all the way to the top. I've met some of those people you watch on TV, and I can tell you, they weren't just talented, they worked like you can't believe to get where they got. And that's a good message for our kids too. But over and over you practice and you train, you put in the time, effort, and energy. There's the 3 words: time, effort, and energy. And you stay focused, even with setbacks and problems and injuries and stuff. And over time, you can maybe be the one that makes it to the top. And a book's been written about it. I asked today in the first session with 9th and 10th graders, anybody ever read the talent code? Was one adult in the back raised his hand, and when I asked in the second group, one adult raised his hand. Man, this book should be like required reading for coaches, teachers, anybody in a youth setting, because it really describes the process you have to go through. And it's the same for everybody, and it's all walks of life. So interestingly enough, if you want to read a good book, Unlocking the Secrets of Skill in Sports, Art, Music, Math, and just about anything, that's what the book's about. And there's some great examples, and I think it'll hold up in any venue. And you can't speed up the process, so be patient, right? So even if you're good at something, you probably greatly underestimate what you're capable of. And I look nowadays and I say, okay, you're good at it, but with a little effort here, maybe you could be great at it. Maybe you could be the best. Maybe you could be the best there's ever been. Everybody has had a chance to start somewhere. And maybe another thing to think about is what you could be if you really put something into it. And never did I see it more in my life than when I started working with that Navy SEAL project. And just when you look at like all these people who want to be a SEAL, and they train and they go and they take these special former SEALs, train them and say, okay, here's how you're going to make it. You got to do, these guys some of them train for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and then they go try out to be a SEAL. And a few make it and a lot don't. But if you really think about it, the process for picking these guys is just so incredibly difficult. And what they want is they want to find guys that just will not quit. I mean, that's capsule summary, but they put you through a process where it just weeds you down to people who just won't quit. So after you become a SEAL, then you train for about 2.5 years before you ever go on a mission or ever deployed. And I have guys that I work with that were former Navy SEALs that do our leadership program. They said, there was nothing we ever saw in combat situation that we hadn't seen in our training. And they're not just saying that, that's the way it is. They're so highly trained. And I say to kids, like when I do talk to athletes, here we go, how'd you like to train for 2.5 years before you ever get to run out on a court or a football field? You think you'd care a little bit more about it? You better believe you would. Why? Just because the investment alone. Imagine 2.5 years before you ever get to do your thing. Well, that's the difference. That's the difference. Maybe you go to do, I don't know, states all have these requirements, 20 practices or whatever. It's not the same. So it was neat to be around that kind of a venue because I really think that it shined a light on it for me of, how highly it is to be selected into that process and how highly trained you are after that point in time. And when you're going through it and the sole purpose is to make you quit and you're fighting it mind, body, and spirit all day long through that whole process, not to quit, not to quit, not to quit. And I've seen and heard so many hundreds of stories of these guys that just succumbed to the trauma and quit. And your dream is over, and that's tragic and sad and pretty rough to deal with. So anyway, you ring out on a bell and you're done and you quit. That's it. And most people are physically capable of making it through that process, but up here they're not capable, and in here they're not capable. And those are the same things that will fail you on a playing field or on a field of battle or any other place. That's the difference. There's 3 sides to being at your best: physical, mental, and something in here. So anyway, here's another model. It's not Navy SEAL model. It's a model for humans. Performance potential is up here. Maybe that's like where you could be. All right, and we could do that. We could talk about the classroom. We could talk about the ballet class. We could talk about music, art, learning a musical instrument, guitar, whatever. And then you have where you are on a day-to-day basis. So here's where you are now, performance, actuality. And then we have some people who are just where they are and they don't even care. Well, every generation, not just these kids today, have a percent of people who maybe they don't care. I have always said this to teachers and coaches. What if you have kids who come to you and they don't care? Well, then it's our job to make them care. Same thing as parents. It's our job to make them care. Your life's pretty important not to care. And if any of those adults fail in a child's life, then somebody else hopefully picks up the slack and helps them realize that they need to care. But human nature is this, you can live in the comfort zone. Humans have a built-in ability to be comfortable. And if we're not comfortable, we don't like it. And I could give you a million scenarios for that, including pain. All right, people want to be in this homeostasis or this comfort zone. But if you really think about it, push through your comfort zone, find out what you're really capable of. Man, and the earlier you start that process, especially when you're a young person, your life unfolds. All these amazing things maybe that you can do or be happen. And Also, if you don't care, a lot of these people are into unhealthy behaviors. I could say this right now looking at this slide. There's unhealthy people at the top. There's unhealthy people where they are, and there's unhealthy people who don't even care. Right? So that's it. That's not going to just be people who don't care. You've read the stories about famous athletes, famous people who had it all, and they were involved in so many unhealthy behaviors that it all went down the tubes. So think about that too. During your middle school to high school time, you'll probably tap into 40, 50, 60% of your potential as anything. And if you stay involved in it after, maybe an athlete goes on to college, maybe you tap into 70, 80% of your potential. And then most all people will quit. I know this from the sport world. And a lot of people will never get to 90 or 100%. Very few people will reach their full potential in anything that they undertake. Again, going back to Matt Viev's famous saying, time will be the factor. You just the timeline stopped, and you just didn't continue to develop. So anyway, here's some other things to think about. Why is it that when we perform in anything, academically, music, art, dance, sports, singing, band, anything, why is it that every time we perform, we don't go out there and have the greatest performance of our life? Wouldn't that be awesome? Every time you run a race, you run a new personal record. Every time you play basketball, you score more points than the previous game. I mean, it would be awesome, but it's never going to happen. So here's what we did. We took sports where performance is performance, like track and field, running, throwing, jumping, swimming, right? So and we threw out performances that were affected by wind and rain and horrible weather and stuff. We got it down to a point where we analyzed their whole competitive season, and we said, okay, what's your average percent of performance compared to your best you've ever done? And there was a huge scatter of performances at 82 to 87%. So here's your best performance ever. Here's your personal record, your fastest you ever ran your race, the farthest you threw the shot put, fastest you ever swam, anything like that. And there's a huge performance cluster at about 82 to 87%. So if you think about this, if I was going to send a team out to play a game, wouldn't it be cool that I could send everybody out there and at their worst, they were going to all be at 82 to 87%. Well, you know what would happen? You'd win a whole bunch of games. And you'd beat a whole bunch of teams that were way better than you or didn't even belong out, you didn't even belong out there with them. And you would perform at a whole new level. But we don't always perform at our best. And there's reasons for that. So we started to look at what were some of those reasons. And then we also started to try to make people realize that you have way more control over that than you would think. And this is sort of more directed into our performance program for athletes. But you put all that time, effort, and energy in, and all you care about is I had a pretty good game, or I did a pretty good performance, or I did pretty good on the test. Well, time, effort, and energy alone should be the dictating factor in you not accepting that you just want to be good. Good isn't good enough when you invest all that time, effort, and energy. You want more out of it than that. But because it's comfort zone, you can fall back and say, well, we played pretty good. Or, but you sell yourself short. That's the bottom line. And I just say, why don't we bring out something better than that in kids? And in order to do that, you need to talk about it. So anyway, that's just something. The single biggest factor in gains or changing or tapping into more potential really is more about your brain and central nervous system than it is about physical performance. And here's a quote: brain science education is critical for understanding how mental and physical performance takes place. All right, where is the understanding of what's going on in the brain and central nervous system so that people have a perspective for how important it is that this is rested and ready to perform. It's called central nervous system readiness. So here's some brain science. The first picture we could find of the first attempt at an MRI machine, and it's sort of a hysterical picture. It looks like a milking machine to me on top of the kid's head. This is actually the first MRI machine. The magnets weren't powerful enough to actually penetrate the thickness of the human skull, so that they couldn't really see what's going on in the brain. And as we've developed technology in recent years, especially the last 10 years, which human performance now it's unbelievable what we're learning from the brain. This is actually a video, and you have this is 7 million neurons, all right? So 7 million neurons, that sounds like a lot, but the average human being has 83 billion neurons. Neurons are brain cells. So the average person has 83 billion brain cells, and that's 7 million. And when I show this and I think about this, I think, can you imagine that there's anything more amazing than the human brain? And to understand that when it's controlling everything you do, not just cognitive function, thinking abilities, but like your brain controls your body. Every athlete, I mean, I can tell you this, bodies don't get tired and muscles don't get fatigued and they just stop performing or they give out. We used to think that. The brain actually shuts down your body under the highest levels of physical stress. So if you could tap into controlling your brain, you don't think your performance would go through the roof? Of course it would. So there's just an example of the power of the human brain and how amazing it is. And I said today to kids, and this isn't just athletes, I said, look, if you want a perspective on what to take care of the rest of your life, it's right here. Because once that's shot, everything sinks. There's no way for mental, cognitive function, anything to take place after you have compromised the brain and central nervous system. So what can we look into? How about sleep, alcohol, marijuana, depressant substances, the effect of technology on the brain, neural fatigue. What happens when the brain gets tired? Performance goes way down in everything. But here's all these topics: energy drinks, mood, stress, hydration, blood glucose levels. Kid doesn't eat breakfast. He's going to school. Good luck trying to learn in a classroom. How much of an edge does it take off? How much does it affect performance, mental and physical? So there's some of the studies. And then I said, okay, here, let's think about this. Pre-K to 12th grade. Pretty important time. How important is it to you guys? I said it today to the kids in the auditorium, right? How important is it to you? Have you thought about it lately? Most important years of your life in preparing for young adulthood. They're not kids anymore. Once you're in high school, you're not a kid anymore, you're a young adult. And that's the way we got to talk to them, and that's the way we should confront anything that compromises those 4 years. Here's the development of a person. Birth to age 1, you learn how to use your senses. 3 phases of development. Birth age 1 to age 12, a lot with motor skills, learning how to use your body and move, and also best time to learn language. That's absolutely for certain. And then the 3rd phase, age 12, 6th or 7th grade to age 21. Higher cognitive function, adult cognitive functions, and skill perfection efficiency for an athlete. All right, your skills continue to improve up to age 21. So here you have a model of what we all went through. And the interesting thing is that halfway through this phase, age 6, a whole bunch of the wiring's already there. So the wiring's there, but you haven't used it enough so that you can actually tap into using it and make progress. So that's a simplification, but that's the way it is. So 95% of the human brain is developed by the age of 6, but then you've got to condition it by using those pathways. So just to give you guys some ideas, and this comes from another huge project, just like human genome, this is human connectome, the circuitry of the brain. It's layered just like a computer chip or wiring is in a device, which is amazing. But here's some of the initial things that we looked at. This is actually the first pictures that came out of human connectome that were published, and it was published in National Geo and some magazines. But I mean, you start looking at these circuits. These circuits are what you use to function as a human being. And you use them the rest of your life from that early age after you burn in those pathways. And this is that motor area of the brain for movement, how you use your arms and legs. A quarter of that whole section is just for this, to use your hands, fine motor skills. All right, so if you think, parents might remember this, your baby's eating off his tray and he's a little tiny kid, 1 year old or something. They can't pick up a Cheerio, they can't do this yet. They pick up with their whole hand something. You learn how to use your body, and a lot of that starts especially at that age of 1 to 6 and beyond. But here's those circuits of the brain, and the final phase of brain development is 12 to 21. I showed you that, and that's from the UCLA Brain Development Study. This was a landmark study that actually proved that a brain continues to develop up to age 21. And after age 21, man, that's it. That's what you got to work with. And I try to say to kids, and I did today, that you need to take some responsibility. This is a very important time to take care of the time, effort, and energy that you put into developing what you're going to be. And that's important for all of us. So here's the study, excuse me. This is 4 or 5 years old. This is 21 years old on the right. This is this is at the yellow line, 6th or 7th grade, hormonal onset or puberty. Look how much orange comes into the picture or yellow comes into the picture after 6th or 7th grade. It's the single biggest phase of brain development of your entire life expectancy. You know, all these things are important from birth till the end of the line, but think how important this phase is. And here's something else. This is a time lapse of birth to age 21 as his brain turns blue, unfortunately a different color. The brain reaching greater and greater levels and abilities and capacities and functions. So that was something that people really need to think about, how important that time is. But here's one of the tidbits that came out of it. The developing brain age 12 to 21 incurs far greater levels of damage than any other time of your life. So if you damage your brain during 12 to 21, you pick the worst time to damage it. So if you had a car accident, you got a massive head injury, if you got multiple concussions, right? All of these states now with high school athletics, you get concussions. Worst time to get a concussion, 12 to 21, because the brain is highly susceptible to damage. So that's something to really consider. And I think everybody realizes that there's an inherent risk in hockey and football and some of these sports where if you get multiple concussions and CTE and the movie Concussion and all this stuff, it's pretty horrendous. So here's some scans. These are scans that show damage. This is a healthy brain, all views. And here's a damaged brain, okay? And if you look, these areas that look like holes, they aren't holes, they're areas of decreased or lowered activity or structural damage. And if you start to think about this, we now have a way to look at something and like damage in the brain and actually quantify it and say, wow, this is really bad. Or in the old days, you know, I mean, I think before we were able to do this, you might say, hey, that's probably not real good for you, but that really wasn't science. This is science. So let me just give you some views. Here's activity levels in the brain. So you can see this red in the back. It's actually back here where your spine joins your back of your skull, brainstem area. That's your brainstem. That's what keeps you alive and breathing and functioning, vital functions. And here's somebody here's somebody that's not stressed. You can see the thinking part of the brain is all blue. Just the brainstem is always lit up. And here's somebody who's stressed. You can see how much stress they have. So we can actually quantify activity levels in the brain. And then we also, from the Human Connectome Project, we actually started to realize that cells that fire together wire together. And I talk a lot about this when I'm talking about addictive drugs, especially this opioid crisis, that we actually create what are called neurotags. And neurotags are actually cells that have learned how to fire back and forth in a sequence. We have neurotags for pain. All right, so somebody who's in pain over a long period of time, these neurotags burn in, and their brain has these sensitized areas for pain and a lot of other things. So neurotags are good and bad. All right, we have neurotags for music and art and math and sports and dance and skills and languages and even creativity. This is actually one for creativity right here. All right, so that's the example. Some people are very creative at solving complex equations, situations, and so forth. Some people aren't. We also have negative neurotags: drugs, addiction, obsession, stress, depression, post-traumatic stress for sure. And there's probably the greatest level of neurotag you have. And then anxiety and pain and pleasure and all these different things. You guys all know that with drugs, addictive drugs especially, you actually turn on that pleasure pathways in the brain, and the brain remembers the memory of the high, and that your brain keeps revolving back to it, and it wants to experience it again and again. So anyway, we also can look at like how these pathways develop, these dendrites that form if you use pathways, these little spiny projections on pathways. Matter of fact, here's maybe you're learning to play the guitar, or you're practicing a skill you've never done. Learning to shoot from the left if you're a basketball player, or dribble with both hands, or a million other scenarios. And you practice and you practice and you practice, and maybe after some weeks you see that, oh my gosh, look, now we have all these connections that we didn't have before, and we can do it easy. It's autopilot. I don't have to think about it. I can come down the court and I can do what I do easily, versus before it was all random. All right. So that's how we burn in these circuits. Here's actually those brain synaptic density, the amount of connections between nerve cells at birth. Here's at age 6, and look, at age 14, it's not even as good as it was at age 6, and I already told you this. At age 6, it's all there. And if you don't use it, guess what happens? You lose it. Use it or lose it. That's the great, that's that's where the quote came from. No. So think of it. By age 6, all the wiring's there. If you don't start using it, burning in those pathways, you lose them. So how do you lose them? Glial cells. Somebody said to me, some kid said to me once, it's like Ghostbusters, when the bad ghosts come to take you away. These pathways or these spiny projections and these glial cells come and they get rid of them. So you could think about pruning. They actually call it pruning. You got a tree and you take away all the stuff you don't use or the dead branches, and that's the same. It's a great scenario, it's an analogy. There it is right there. Use it or lose it at this age. And that's a pretty simple way to explain it, but that's the way it is. So we also looked at these chemicals that are in your brain, and the 3 biggies, melatonin and serotonin and dopamine. And melatonin is the one that runs that sleep-wake cycle. But if you just look at the 3, these control all movement, the initiation of human movement, all related to it, and also all cognitive function. So if you're down on neurotransmitters, you're out. I mean, it's not going to work. So here's something to think about. Neurotransmitters are reloaded at night when you're asleep. This is 8 hours of sleep, and that's a scan specific to neurotransmitters. So if you get 8 hours of sleep, your brain is loaded up with neurotransmitters. You're good to go the next day for cognitive function and movement. All right, if you get minimized sleep, 6 hours, 4 hours, look what you start the day with. And I can tell you this right now, we got a generation of kids, and I can tell you this in what I see in first period assemblies, right? Because I was doing one today, I'm doing one tomorrow. We got a whole bunch of kids, and that's their neurotransmitter levels. And they start the day with that. And it's not going to sustain you through a whole day of anything. And I can tell you this, by the time you get to practice at 3 o'clock, there's a scenario we're going to go over with that too. So you reload these at night during REM sleep. It's absolutely critical and pivotal to have fully loaded neurotransmitters. If they're depleted, like I said, you're dead in the water. We also know there's accelerants. All right, what would you think would happen to your neurotransmitters if you use a stimulant? If you overuse a stimulant? You'll vaporize and use up your neurotransmitters faster. Ironically, if you use depressants, the same thing happens. You would think that if I use a depressant, I'll use up my neurotransmitters slower. No, you'll still use them up faster. So just to give you guys an idea, we've done a ton of work around sugar. I was just in Russia for 4 months, and boy, I'll tell you, my body cleans out from this sugar that's mixed into everything that we eat, unfortunately. And I just feel so much healthier, and then I come back and it's mixed in everything. But here you go. Sugar actually makes you uptake, and these are estimates. It was in Brain, a study that was published in Brain magazine. They say you uptake and use up your neurotransmitters at a rate 350 times greater than normal. All right, so if you have a sugar-based diet, which a lot of kids do nowadays, Fruit Loops for breakfast and candy bars and soda and all this other stuff, you just use up your neurotransmitters at an incredibly increased rate. Here's actually another slide just to give you some of the stuff from our anti-sugar program. This is a teenager that's addicted to sugar, and you give them sugar, and look what the brain does. It lights up just like it does with cocaine or meth or crack or anything. They're addicted to sugar. And here's a kid who's not addicted to sugar who's given sugar. Look at their brain. Right? So once you sensitize your brain to sugar, your brain runs on sugar. And that's not going to help you perform, believe me. And plus the fact that you actually will use up those neurotransmitters and then have no energy levels, or they'll be far below those levels that you could be at. If you use a stimulant like caffeine, it increases your uptake of neurotransmitters about 500 times. And I'm not talking like having a cup of coffee in the morning or even 2. I'm talking people who drink caffeine all day long because they feel tired and drained and exhausted. And we have now, 350 kinds of energy drink? Who's that made for? Not my generation. My generation was two energy drinks, coffee and tea. And now we have all these energy drinks, and kids rely on them, and kids use them. Well, they're not for athletes. So here's some of our propaganda for athletes. It's not for sport. I got a study I can show you with Red Bull that they gave swimmers Red Bull, and they swam slower. I mean, that's a good one for people to see right there. It overstimulates the central nervous system, use up your neurotransmitters, and movements are depleted, not accelerated. Matter of fact, we found that people who use stimulants like caffeine all the time have very high levels of neural fatigue. You dig yourself a gigantic neural fatigue hole that you can't come out of, and they stay inflamed all the time. So people who are in sport, you're banged up and beat up and sore and inflamed all the time because you overuse stimulants like caffeine. So here's the actual truth on caffeine. I'll even throw it out here. I'd rather be honest with you. If you add a little caffeine, it actually amplifies mental and physical performance. I'm not telling somebody to do it. I'm not telling an athlete to do it. But I'm saying this. Does caffeine amplify mental and physical performance? Without a doubt. But at a level that's the equivalent of 1 to 2 standard cups of coffee, 100 to 200 milligrams of caffeine, and performance actually goes up a little bit. So think about that, because people overuse it. And once you overuse it, you get overstimmed, and it works the other direction. We actually did some studies on seals at buds when they're going through that horrible torture process, and they found that 100 to 200 milligrams of caffeine, the equivalent of 1 to 2 cups of standard coffee, actually amplifies mental and physical performance. Nicotine, wicked stimulant, most addictive substance you can put in a human body. More addictive than crack, meth, opioids, anything. A lot of people don't know that. Nicotine has unbelievable lock on the craving sites in the human brain and the gratification sites in the human brain. It's the hardest drug to quit. That's a fact. Increases the uptake and use of those neurotransmitters, estimated 700 times. So cocaine's at 700 times. The most of anything they did in this, that was in this original, these projections, was methamphetamine. They said increased the neurotransmitter use and uptake 1,000 times. So think about that. Here now, depressants. These aren't stimulants, these are depressants, but the brain floods those neurotransmitters when you're used to drinking. So, some adult is, had a rough day at work, comes home, and every day they drink 3 or 4 drinks. And the brain floods with those neurotransmitters, whatever's left from their long day of work, because you used them all day. And it increases the uptake and use of neurotransmitters about 225 times. And marijuana, 100 times. So these are the examples of, once you get hooked on substances, they don't help you. They impact and hurt you. So also looking at the brain, the electrical measurements that we can look in the brain. Here's normal brain waves, and if you look, these EEG waves are how we can see if the brain is working and functioning. Is it healthy? Is it abnormal? Is there something that has changed those waves? So look, let's say right now everybody here is not under the influence of something, and I hook up these sensors on these different parts of your brain, and your EEG is normal and it looks like this. Or maybe we see that your EEG looks like exhibit B, abnormal, that you have. It could be anything. It could be stress, it could be drugs, it could be depression, it could be low blood glucose levels. Your brain runs on blood glucose. It could be sugar, it could be stimulants, it could be depressants, anything, you name it. So think about how we have normal brain function and we have abnormal brain function, another way to show it. So then we could think about this. Okay, none of us here are probably, maybe we have an orthopedic surgeon here, I don't know, or an x-ray tech. There's a broken leg. And when you look at this picture, we know that that's a broken leg. And so now we can maybe start to think about broken brains. 4 views: top, looking down on top of the brain; frontal, light forehead view, the thinking part of your brain; bottom, the deepest damage, and side view. And here's again those rotoscans. If you look at this, healthy and damaged brains. All right. And maybe start to take some of it into consideration. So there's a heavily damaged brain, and here is severe brain injury. So maybe this is from a car accident. Here's the slide for wearing a seatbelt, or here's the slide for wearing a helmet if you're a skier or a snowboarder, or taking care of this, because if you take wicked, hard, blunt trauma to the thinking part of the brain, you can actually wipe it out. And the rest of your life, you would maybe be alive, but you would never come, back into consciousness, or you'd have to be fed and taken care of, and you would, you'd be alive, but you wouldn't have any brain function. Here is someone who's had a stroke. I mean, I think everybody has seen somebody who's had a stroke, and maybe if the stroke is here on the left side of the brain, their right side, the opposite side would be paralyzed. Maybe they would have, paralysis, facial paralysis, or, arm, leg paralysis, or so forth. Here's Alzheimer's, brain degeneration. And nowadays, because a lot of people don't take care of themselves, you can have this begin even in 40s, 50 years old, and really have it accelerate as you reach advanced age. Here's some of those NFL and NHL scans from head injuries in sport. Here's actually one from the NFL study. Look at the damage from multiple concussions. Not a concussion, multiple concussions. And come on, let's face it. Out of 112 NFL players, like 110 or 111 had CTE. I mean, it's all out in the open. It's an inherent risk of the sport now, and we have to face the facts on that. Here's some drug scans. Here's cocaine. Here's methamphetamine. Horrible drug, structural damage. I mean, just a lot of it's irreversible. Here's marijuana. As you blow them up, they lose their resolution. Here's alcohol. Here's opioids. Here's heroin, right? Which a lot of people who get hooked in the opioid situation end up very quickly switching to heroin. Here's 7 years of opioid dependence. And I talked to the kids today just quickly about it. How did we unleash this one on our own kind, our own people in this country? Why are we the only country in the world dealing with this? And there's an answer to all that, but I'm not going to go into it now. It's sad and tragic. How many tens of thousands of people have died? This is deaths of opioids 1999. I'm going to speak about this in California in 2 weeks. I've done their state conference already. But the wave of death of opioids, check this out. Here's by 2014. And if that's not shocking, and that's not enough reason that this stuff should have been yanked, it's beyond any logic. And yet it's still on the shelves, it's still being peddled, it's just a little more controlled than it was. It's sad. I personally know 2 young people, 2 kids I used to babysit that died as a result of this. It hurts to talk about it. And this is 2014. Guess how it is today? It's worse than this by far. I think they stopped producing these heat maps just because of, it just makes it look worse than it is. How much can kill you? I don't know. A grain of salt, a grain of sugar on a table will take you out with these new ones. Fentanyl, carfentanil. I mean, it's incredible, the potency of this stuff. You can't make this stuff up. If you guys go online and read up about the brick of carfentanil that came into Canada as computer printer parts, and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police found it, and it was enough of the drug to kill 50 million people. And the population of Canada is 39 million people. That's how potent this stuff is. And people mess with this. And I said to kids today, you mess with this, you're playing with death. You have no idea what you're dealing with. And if you really think about it, brainstem, when you take this stuff, very rapidly shuts down. And you're gone. And that's it. And the seriousness of this is it's been so trivialized. You read about the estimates of how many people have died as a result of it. Just to give you an idea, this is some of the stuff we work on. Combination of 200 milligrams of ibuprofen and 500 milligrams of acetaminophen. Those are over-the-counter NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. You can buy them anywhere. It's Aleve and Advil and those things. Is one of the strongest pain reliever combinations found to be more effective than opioids by American Dental Association, surgeons, you name it. I mean, where is this? Why aren't people? Why isn't this being prescribed? It's hard to imagine. We could sure have saved a lot of lives. But anyway, that's something to think about. Next time you have pain and it's pretty bad, try this. They call it the pain cocktail for most people, and it works. So stress. How does stress help? It doesn't. Stress and stressors of the day accumulate. From the time you awaken till the time you crash and go to sleep, you've accumulated a whole bunch of stress. Even structurally, you've accumulated stress. I can tell you an example. You stand all day. Some of you guys are teachers and coaches, right? You know what happens to people when you get structurally fatigued? When you're rested, you stand equal weight on both feet. When you start getting tired, you shift your weight, right? You do this. And when you get real tired, you start leaning against stuff. That's what speakers do. I'm not there yet. So anyway, think about that. Stress and stressors accumulate. Here we have these scans like I showed before on stress. Here's some stress. Calm, there's the thinking part of the brain, brainstem. Here's stressed. There's panic level stress, right? When you freak out, when you shake, when you start breathing fast, your heart's beating out of your chest, you've released all those stress hormones. And then there's, beyond panic level stress, there's PTSD. Stress that either resurfaces again and again and again and again, and it never goes away, and it's in an ancient primitive part of your brain called the amygdala, and you'll never forget it, and you'll never get past it. And you know, we've dealt a lot with this in the military populations. So expectations create stress, yes? Is it just coming from the kids? No, I will remind you parents that you can create and incubate stress for your child. It's a fact. Expectations, with expectations, especially high expectations, comes stress. So I started to think, okay, where do we provide a sports psychologist for our athletes? No, the coach is the sports psychologist. And there's some coaches in this room right now, and you know what I'm talking about. You do the best you can to help kids get past where they are. All right? So you think about that. Is it important that a kid learns some skills to deal with stress, not suck it up, or everybody's got to deal with this? That's not going to help a kid. Suck it up. That's worthless. So what can we do? We could teach kids usable skills that they can deal with stress. And that's got to be taught. Well, that's what the emphasis of our newest project, Mental Wellness for Top Performance, mental or physical, is. So stress can come from expectations, and a lot of times it's not fair, but it's true. We had to deal with it too as adults. Stress comes from adults. It does. It comes from society, right? To achieve, to accomplish, to, you know, think of the educational system, right? Test scores and all the stuff, getting in the right school, winning, starting, being the best player, getting a scholarship. You know, come on. That's what we got. We need to reframe it. Yes, some people are going to excel. I showed you that already. Some of it's genetic, some of it's motivation, some of it's that you care more, you work harder for it. But also think about this. Let's not add to it. Stress starts with a perception. Stress doesn't come from what's going on in your life. It comes from what's going on in your head. There's a capsule summary. So think how we could reframe this for kids to help them get past where they are. Because we have a lot of kids succumbing to stress. And I can prove it with one statement. 1 out of 5 of them, 20% of kids today, have mental health related issues. And most of them are stress related. So minimize stress so we can maximize performance. They're not giving out Texas state medals for stress. You're the stress champion. It's not it. Neither is any other state association, right? So how do we help kids with stress? We need to start to help them. And I'll also say this, that in 24 hours, the goal is not to accumulate stress, it's to reduce it as much as possible. And a lot of this you bring upon yourself. So if you're in here today as an athlete, I can tell you, you have stress-related issues that you actually bring upon yourself. Nobody performs better under stress. Some people perform better than others, but there are no positive adaptations to stress. We tried stress inoculation studies on Navy SEALs and other populations, and found that yes, you can accumulate and handle more stress up to a certain point, but the ability to handle more stress, there are no positive adaptations. And I can tell you that it becomes toxic, and it will impair first your immune system, and if you look at people who are stressed, they're sick all the time. It's very hard to stay healthy, and eventually it actually can end up, you can end up succumbing to it. That's just reality. So I would rather say that negative adaptation to stress have no positive impact, and we need to start to realize this for kids. Also, we did studies on neural fatigue. That's, if you want a definition of neural fatigue, it's coming up. Your brain is really tired. Your brain ramps up energy. It can actually, downplay energy levels too. Of course, you want your brain to ramp up energy in the morning, but you don't want to run out of energy like this. Every kid knows these symbols. They pop up on their phone many times during the week. Neural fatigue, best definition, your brain's exhausted. We know that the brain has to be recharged. Unfortunately, we can't put a plug on it, but I can also tell you this. Studies have been done now, and here's some of them. Your brain boots up energy levels in the morning. It's not like you hit the start button on your computer and you hear the hard drives going and your brain just boots up and it's ready to go. It takes time. So here's some studies. This is actually brain scan. This is waking at 7:16 in the morning. This is at 8:30 in the morning. This is at 10 o'clock in the morning. Brains boot up their energy levels and they reach a level of performance at about 10 o'clock in the morning, especially with this generation of kids because they don't sleep enough. And I'll document that in a second. So Sherry Ma at Stanford did some studies and found that the brain builds up energy reserves or deficits over 1 to 3 days. Well, go with 3, because I can tell you this right now. They also speculate that if you have something important on a Saturday and you get a good night's sleep on Friday, you cannot ensure that you're going to go out there and shine from a standpoint of your central nervous system function and readiness with 1 good night of sleep. Go with 3. Get good sleep Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, and then you'll have enough CNS reserves to perform. So think about this. This could be a test. It could be your driver's test because you want to drive around in your pickup. It could be musical performance, dance, anything. A final exam, your college entrance exams, the game that you play once a week or twice a week. So think about how important it is that you understand this. And athletes, of course, this is huge. You know, when I deal with NBA teams, I mean, you think these guys are playing 100 games? 100 games. Well, you just get on a schedule and, you know, you finish the game, you do your recovery process, you go to sleep. That's it. Best friend you got is sleep. So neural fatigue, the number one inconsistent or random performance suspect is neural fatigue. So if your team goes in a slump and you start playing terrible and you're losing games, your stats have gone down the tubes, you know, guess what? It's probably not your body. It's the connection between your brain, which is really fatigued, and your body. So that's an interesting one. Neural fatigue, what we call now total quality movements. All right, that's like making exact movements, or how about this? Accuracy, consistency, precision, repetition, biomechanics, high-speed decision making. This is not a total quality movement here. That's an error, right? So think about when somebody has these days where it's like dysfunctional skill levels. Guess what the number one suspect should be? The central nervous system is very fatigued and you need to rest it up. Here are some of the studies. Wakefulness and performance. This is the brain boots up energy levels very quickly. This is speed of mental functions, accuracy of mental functions. So look how fast your brain boots up energy in the morning, just like if you turned on your computer. But check this out. Reaches its peak at 10. Look what happens after 10. All of them start to tank. Look at some of them are dramatic. And look what happens in the afternoon. They go down the tubes. So from 1 o'clock on, we're in a school. What do you see with kids in 1 o'clock after lunch? Or maybe not just kids. You're back at the office. You had lunch, right? Your blood glucose levels go up. You get a little energy surge. And then all of a sudden, you feel like somebody pulled the plug on you. How many athletes, I said today, or people after school feel like you're going to practice at 3 o'clock and you're going like, I'm dragging so bad, man. How am I going to make it through this workout? You guys have all been there, right? By 3 o'clock, you're going like, oh man, I have no energy today. Well, it's natural. You can't keep it up there forever. So 9 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and 7 o'clock at night. Look at your energy levels. Down, down, down they go. Mednick did a study in 2002. Check this out. Look what happens if you take a nap. Wow. The nap. Remember the nap when we were in kindergarten? They gave us a little mat and you laid down on it and you took a little snoozer, right? They do that with little kids. They're not going to give you a nap at school. I told the kids that today, and I was speaking for you administrators. I said, look, they're not going to give you a nap, sorry. Well, how about this? How about instead of a nap where you get 30% increase in alertness and from a 20 to 30 minute nap, and you get a 40% increase in creativity after a 20 to 30 minute nap, guess what? 10 minutes of mindfulness does the same thing. It's been proven. Don't think about anything for 10 minutes. Put your head down, turn the lights out, no sound, no stim. And now we've got schools that are actually having 10 minutes of mindfulness to start the second half of the day. It's like halftime, halfway through the day. And kids respond. Kids all of a sudden reboot their central nervous energy levels, and they actually have a much more successful second half of the day. What if you could take a 10-minute nap before practice? right? You go there, you're having a bad day, you're dragging, you're out of energy, and you can just go and chill for 10 minutes. I guarantee your total quality movements are going to go way up, and the quality of your training is probably going to be way better than if you don't hit the deck for 10 minutes. So there's little time left in our culture for thinking about nothing. The best way to transition from being awake to falling asleep is also 10 minutes of mindfulness, if you can pull it off. And here's just one of our posters. How's your quiet life? I don't know. Maybe you don't have any. Most kids don't have any. You know when their quiet time is? Whatever number of hours they sleep. Okay? So think about it. We need time even during our waking hours just to take a break. It's got a huge impact. How many minutes of quiet do you have today? I asked those kids today, and I'll ask the kids at the other high school tomorrow. It's just something where you don't think about it. So sleep, some sleep studies. The largest performance variable outside of training methods, right, and recovery methods is sleep, and it's the #1 recovery method. Worldwide studies are going on sleep right now. Sherry Ma at Stanford started this whole thing. She did the first studies on top-level athletes at Stanford about sleep, and it took off. So the single biggest factor in how things are going to go tomorrow in anything is how much you slept. And I think that for you parents streaming this, or you parents here, I can tell you this right now. You want your kid to shine tomorrow? Boy, make sure there's a bedtime and make sure they go to sleep, because it has huge dividends. There's now 110 different kinds of sleep disturbances. It's just part of being human. They just did the largest sleep study in history. 6 billion nights of sleep were analyzed, and guess what they found out? That people aren't sleeping enough. They did this right after the study where they found out that trees were made of wood. So, you think about this. It's like we have minimized sleep to the point where most people just don't get enough sleep. And for you parents live streaming this or are here tonight, I want you to right now to think about when you brought your baby home from the hospital, and then you went into this sleep debt that lasted some years. 16 hours a day, humans are supposed to be up. 8 hours are supposed to be down. This is never going to change. We've just tried to shift things around so it's 17, 18, 19, and this gets lower. So again, those neurotransmitters reload. Got to do it. It's not going to happen during the day. It's going to happen at night when you're asleep. This is another quote. If you're tired most of the time or all the time, you just get used to being tired. There's the quote for parents with young babies at home, and you're up all night and you're waking up 5 times, and the quality of your sleep is trashed because you don't go into REM or stay in REM. We did a survey and found that the average middle school and high school kids are sleeping about 6 hours and 46 minutes a night. Not going to help. It's not going to. You can't perform at a high level. It's not going to pay dividends. You're going to underperform just because of this, because you have neural fatigue and you have no neurotransmitters, and you're not going to be able to function. So 8 hours of sleep. Here's another study, and you get an hour and a half less than your normal amount, and your brain's alertness levels drop by 30%. Since so many kids sleep 6 hours, let's look at it. 8 hours, here's morning, noon, and night. Gradual decline in energy levels, all right? And here's 6 hours, which is 25% less sleep. Look at morning to noon, it goes down gradually. It's just you have a lower baseline. And from noon till night, it goes off the cliff. And just about the time you go to practice, for you guys that are athletes or you care about something after school, when it's your time, right? You end up with the slows or no energy, or the quality of your training is down here when it could be up here and you could be making progress. So think how important sleep is. So you can take your pick, gradual or rapid decline. And while you're asleep, 3 other things happen. You actually, during the day, take in information. It goes to your short-term memory, and you what we call rehearse it. Hopefully the kids who saw something this morning are rehearsing it, and tonight, if they go to sleep. At night, when you're asleep, it gets encoded and sent to your long-term memory. The second transfer and encoding happens at night when you're in REM sleep. So if you study and you don't sleep, it doesn't ever go on the hard drive, save, so that you can recall it the next day. That's a simplification, but that's the way it is. You download the information at night when you're asleep. Also, all training effect, the majority of training effect takes place at night when you're asleep. It's in conjunction with the release of human growth hormone and other training hormones that happen at night when you're asleep. So think of going and doing a great workout, but then you don't sleep. The money never goes in the bank. That's unfortunate. So you just did a great workout and you say, hey coach, I did a great workout, but you don't benefit from it. Or Movement memory. You practice a skill. You have an incredible day at practice. You don't miss a shot. You say to yourself at the end of the practice, man, I wish I'd had a game today. I would have scored 30 points, right, Coach? And instead, it never integrates with the movement memory part of the brain in the motor cortex, and your skills don't get better. They stay the same, or maybe in some cases get worse. So think how important it is that people make this stuff happen while you're asleep. Also, sleep modulates your mood. Now, we have all seen somebody who doesn't sleep and they're grumpy the next day, or edgy, or their hackles are up for no reason, right? Moody. Well, that's what it does. It doesn't swing you towards positive circuits. When you have minimized sleep, it actually swings you towards negative thoughts, impulsivity, depression, anxiety. One of the biggest things with people who have depression is, man, you got to really start to do some sleep studies and find out if they're getting enough sleep. All right, I'm wrapping up here. Academics, just to give you an idea, 30% loss of your thinking, cognitive function if you pull an all-nighter. Here's a study we did with our New Hampshire Life of an Athlete program. All high schools in the state of New Hampshire go through our program. The program is run through their state athletic association for all student athletes. Kids who pull all-nighters have a GPA of 295. Kids who study and then go to sleep have a 3.20 GPA. Again, there's the diagram of loading the information to your long-term memory. This is from sleep deprivation studies we looked at for the Navy SEALs. 6 hours of sleep at the Naval Academy in 2000, that's the GPA. In 2001, 6 hours of sleep at the Naval Academy, that's all they gave them to sleep, that's their GPA. They said it's ridiculous. They started giving them 8 hours. Look what happened to the GPA. So, I mean, I can pull like 50 studies and show you this. Here's the study that we did. This is 4, 5, 6, and 7 hours of sleep. You know why we didn't do 8? Hardly any kids were sleeping 8. It was 18% of kids that were sleeping 8 hours or more. So we went 4, 5, 6, 7. Look, GPA goes from a 2.5 to a 3.5. What? So you want to be smarter, you want to get better grades, you got to sleep. There's another one. Here's one from that Stanford did, and a lot of the study was done also at UC Berkeley. Under 5 hours of sleep, 5 to 6 hours of sleep, 7 or more. The more you sleep, the smarter you are. Some enders here. I told you if you damage the brain between 12 and 21, it's the worst time to damage the brain. Here's a scan of a healthy 17-year-old. Here's a scan of a heavy alcohol-using 17-year-old. Okay? It's not a 50, 60-year-old alcoholic that's been drinking for 40 years. This is a kid's brain. You can do a lot of damage during that 12 to 21 time frame. Here's healthy top scan, 17 years old, heavy alcohol-using 17-year-old. Top and bottom, healthy scan, 17 years old, heavy alcohol user, 17 years old, 1 year after the kid stopped using alcohol. And what you can see is that surface damage has started to repair, deep damage is repairing, but there's still a heck of a lot of damage. You can damage your brain incredibly during that time frame of 12 to 21 years old. Also, you're highly susceptible to addiction during that time when you're going through that vast, incredible surge of brain development. Your brain is ripe for the picking of getting locked in on an addiction or heading towards it. This is brain scans from the famous study Susan Tapert did out in San Diego with teenage alcoholics. This is normal brain activity during a simple cognitive memory task. Their brain sparks up all this energy level. These are kids who are alcoholics doing the same memory task. Look at what they spark up. That's cognitive damage in the pathways for cognitive function for memory of kids who have been drunk so many times that a lot of the damage is structural, permanent damage. So this dispels, this was the first study that dispelled that, hey, I'm young, I can do this terrible damage to myself and it's no big deal. It's a big deal. So that's that. Here's some new studies. We can now track if athletes have major disturbances to training effect. The blue line is training effect, and if you look, it should be going across this way. And here's the disturbances, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 disturbances over a month. And if you look at this one, this is New Year's Eve. So this is drinking, drinking, drunk, drinking, drinking. Every time you consume alcohol, if you're an athlete, your system is so sensitive to these training and recovery and performance that it throws you into a tailspin. And so if you really start thinking about it, with this new system that we can detect disturbances to training, we can see the same thing even from lack of sleep and some other stresses. So if you have a decrease in these hormones that you need to train and recover and perform, here's actually some testosterone levels of Navy SEALs rested. Here's testosterone levels of guys that were drinking on the weekend. Look what it does to your testosterone levels. And I put this on here because it's not a bad statement. Females have 10 to 15, males have 10 to 15 times more testosterone than females. Okay, we produce way more, 10 to 15 times more than females. And what we found, in fact, was that guys, when they had drank heavily, their testosterone levels, males' testosterone levels, were like female levels. And so I put the statement on here almost to like just say, okay, since there's no female Navy SEALs, I said, you know, this is what it does to you. And it, you know, this is not going to support any function. Cortisol, our major stress hormone, is up for 48 hours after using alcohol. Here's a study of all age groups, 18 to 30, 31 to 40, 41 to 50, 51 to 65. One drink and already your recovery metrics start to go down. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 drinks. The more you drink, the lower they go. So anybody who drinks, it's how much you drink. Sure, it has an impact, but it starts with the first drink. The human body is so sensitive to alcohol that if you take in one alcoholic beverage, your systems already start to tank. That right there shows that a metabolic poison doesn't really help you much. And if you correlate how long these hormones are down, up to 4 days or 96 hours after intoxication, how much do you lose? The 4 days? No, they have to go back up so that you lost the 4 days for them to come back up. If you drink on a Saturday, they come back up on Wednesday. But you lost all the training. You were at practice, you know, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and then Wednesday, and now you're back to being an athlete. We correlated that every time you get drunk, you lose about 14 days of training effect. And human growth hormone, which is the single biggest factor in muscle repair, new muscle mass forming, you know, people putting on mass so you're a better athlete. A lot of you guys, that's a major concern. It tanks to the tune of 70% after getting drunk. New muscle mass forming shuts down by 2/3. Injury rate for drinkers is twice as high as for non-drinkers. That's from the NCAA sport on football injuries. The highest injury sport's football. Why do drinkers, regular users of alcohol, have 54% injury rate and non-drinkers have 23%? I'll tell you why. They have no HGH. They stay banged up and beat up and sore until it turns into an injury. This is what I do when I go in to talk to these professional athletes. You can't drink. You're playing 100 games. You're playing, 83 games during the regular season? Every night you're sore and banged up and beat up, and you need all your body's resources to come to repair it. So here's a study on REM sleep, the deepest kind of sleep. Out of 8 hours of sleep, you get about 1.5 to 2.5 hours of REM. With no alcohol, they got 2 hours and 27 minutes of REM. With 2 alcoholic beverages before they went to sleep, it cut the REM down to 131. With 4 alcoholic beverages, it cut it down to 58 minutes. With 6 alcoholic beverages, it cut it down to 31 minutes. The more you drink, the more it disturbs REM. If you get drunk, you get no REM sleep. None of the restorative functions take place at night when you're asleep. That's a fact. And you lose all that repair, reboot, rejuvenate, restore. Everything is shot. This is actually 73% loss of the ability to burn fat if you use alcohol. So there's no way you're going to keep fat off. You're not going to be lean. You're going to keep body fat on because you don't have the ability to tap into burning fat as a fuel because the alcohol blocks it. So that's a pretty good sound bite too. Marijuana, I told the kids today that I didn't come here to get into a philosophical agreement or a debate about how awesome it is or not. Lots of people think this is a harmless substance. So I'm just going to paint the picture for you. That's what I said. So here's the science on pot. Things like this. How long does it stay in your system? Where does it go? Where does it deposit? And what does it affect? So let's start out with this one because this is the kicker. 80 to 85% of kids that are in rehab today, teenagers that are in rehab today, are there for marijuana. And people think it's a non-addictive, harmless drug. Well, go visit the youth rehab center where there's just teenagers and ask them, what's the drug that put you here today? And 8 to 8.5 out of 10 of them are going to tell you weed. So it is a addictive substance. It's increased in potency since I was in high school, I told them today, 1970 to 74. I told them my age, right? It's increased 300% in potency during that time. Pot in those days, 1 to 4% maximum THC, and now teens to 20s. It stays in your system 10 to 14 days. It used to stay in your system 3 to 5 to 7 days. Now, because it's so potent, it stays in your system for anywhere from 10 to 14 days. And even with edibles and those things, even now, some people have reported as much as 20 days in your system. So think about, it's in your system and you smoke pot once a week. It never leaves your system. It will accumulate and continue to accumulate to greater and greater levels if you smoke it once a week on a Friday or Saturday night. And then next week, it's not out of your system yet, right? It takes 10 to 14 days, and it's only 6 days later, and you smoke it again, more accumulates. And the next week, you go on to a party, and you smoke it more accumulates. And as it builds up in your system in receptor sites, it starts to create problems. Where does it accumulate? Receptor sites for pot are in the brain, the liver, and the bladder. Okay, three significant places. That's an all-body scan. Here's in the brain. This is the famous NIDA tracer study. 4 different parts of the brain where pot deposits. 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right? So let's see. Here's a picture of pot fluoresce in brain tissue. That's a daily pot smoker's brain. You smoke pot once, there's some specks of green. You smoke it again, there's more. You smoke it again, there's more. Pretty soon, your whole brain looks like this. Even if you smoke it once a week, it's increasing all the time in your brain tissue. Here's another view of it. Again, fluoresced THC in brain tissue. This is brain waves, a person before smoking pot. This is brain waves after they smoke pot. So this was the ha-ha funny slide for today with the kids. And you know, I just look at this and I say, okay, if this is normal, we're all cognitive, and maybe we're tired from our long day, but we're all right now thinking, we're not under the influence of anything, and somebody smokes pot, and it scrambles your brain waves like that, is there somebody here who believes that's actually going to help you? And especially if we're talking about high-level performance, is this going to help you? And I'd have to probably tell you that it's not. And so that's an EEG of the brain. Here's an 18-year-old after 3 months of pot use. Anomalies already on the way. So think about that. You just started, but already look, we've already got something happening. Here's a 16-year-old healthy kid. Here's a daily user, 16 years old. All these drugs are different, right? I mean, we look at all these. I mean, if you looked at scans just for a certain substance, you'd start to be able to say that's meth or that's crack or that's, you know, there's anomalies in what these drugs do. But look at the damage. And here's a bottom scan, healthy 16-year-old. Look at the damage. This is up in the thinking part of the brain, right behind your forehead. This is that area for movement, pre-movement and movement. And then think that that's going to help you. You think I haven't had these discussions with NBA players, NFL players, people who cashed in their $1 million contracts because they couldn't stop smoking pot? Some are in Texas. Oh my God, that was in the paper this week, right? No offense. Can you imagine? It's got that much of a lock on you that you can't put it aside and, you know, after your career's over, do what you want to do, but they can't stop. So think how bad it is. These are brain waves and REM waves during sleep, all right? So you go into REM and you restore, repair, rejuvenate, reload, reboot. REM waves are so totally unique compared to any other brain waves. And look what pot does to REM. It slows down the brain waves, all right? So you go from REM, which is up here, to what's called sub-REM. And if you don't go into full REM sleep, you release a hormone called somatostatin. And somatostatin is a hormone that actually is called growth hormone inhibiting hormone. So growth hormone is how you grow. Your bones grow when you're young, right? You go through growth spurt first. Then you hit puberty and you start putting on mass, right? You start getting jacked. You put on 5 pounds, 10 pounds, 20 pounds. You start filling out, what they used to call, right? Think about that. And you're smoking pot during those years. Let me repaint the picture. You release somatostatin, it's growth hormone inhibiting hormone. It shuts off the release of HGH. So here's the first study. 217 boys that smoke pot daily, all right? And 220 boys who have never smoked pot. And they tracked them until they're past age 20. So they're done with growth spurt. They're past puberty. And guess what they find? This group, on an average, is 9 pounds heavier and 4.5 inches taller than the other group. Same ethnicity, same location, same diet, same everything. But one group's into pot and one's not. So they published some studies about this, and especially in boys, you get this huge problem with growth of your body systems during puberty. Well, that's the first time anybody linked somatostatin to these issues. So the tracer study of deposit sites, what's with all this in the back here? This is the cerebellum. It's called the little brain. Right? It's responsible for some pretty important things. Equilibrium, balance, muscle tone, ability to perform rapid alternating movements. If you ever stand on one foot and put your head back, some people just tip over. They get vertigo. Old people especially get vertigo because their cerebellum shrinks. You know, their cerebellum's this big, and by the time they're really old, 80s, 90s, their cerebellum's like the size of a golf ball, right? So your cerebellum is your gyroscope, right? It keeps you balanced and upright. And you know, like athletes in certain sports, like figure skaters who put their head back and spin at that rate, and aerialists that go up in the air and spin all around, gymnasts, right? You have to do cerebellum training because you lose your bearings of where you are in time and space when your cerebellum's all out of position. So think about this. Pretty important for coordination, but also the cerebellum is also responsible for all these functions. And what it does is it coordinates with other really important parts of the brain. So here's the cerebellum in the back, and it's loaded with THC, which all these yellow dots are the THC concentrations. But here's the connection that breaks down. The cerebellum and the motor memory part of the brain, or the movement motor cortex of the brain. And it creates confusion so that this cannot coordinate with this. And here's a cerebellum of a healthy non-pot smoker. Here it is in the back. And here's a cerebellum of a pot smoker. And what happens is your cerebellum enlarges. So people who smoke weed, their cerebellums are enlarged. And it's not because it's full of THC, but it's there. So here's some other things. Your cerebellum is also important in attention, focus, inhibition, abstract reasoning, and what's called executive functions. And if you wanted to ever figure out, and we went through years where people said, hey, you know what? If you smoke a lot of weed, you're not motivated, you just don't care about what you used to care about. You know, this amotivational syndrome was linked to pot back in the 60s and 70s with weak pot. Well, they don't even talk about it anymore, but look at this. Executive function describes the processes that regulate self-directed behavior towards a goal. How about this? I don't care. How about, you could have millions of dollars. I don't care. I want to smoke pot. I don't care. Don't think that isn't the connection right there. So here's the issue. This is the white matter of the brain. A lot of it's between the two halves of your brain, and it's how the brain sends signals and communicates. It coordinates all the communication of brain regions and action potentials, even the action potentials for movement. So think of this. Here's the white matter in a non-pot smoker, especially here in yellow and blue. Look what happens in pot smokers. You can see that it's atrophied or it's shrunken in size or magnitude. So anyway, that's about white matter. 1 in 5 kids that are teen drivers say they've driven under the influence of marijuana, and a third of them said it didn't affect their driving. Who's the insurance policy under? Moms and dads? The kids paying the insurance? Not usually. What happens if your kid gets in an accident and they give him a test and he's under the influence? That's for you at home streaming too, right? That's on you. What if they kill an innocent person? And they're going to, believe me, they're going to check them when they have an accident. That's for certain. That's something to consider. Here's reaction timing. A healthy young person's reaction time is about 186 thousandths of a second. Less than a quarter of a second to react. That's when you're rested. You got the neurotransmitters. You got good blood glucose levels. You're rested. You're ready to rock and roll. All right? Here. Once a week pot smokers, 300 milliseconds, a third of a second. 3 to 4 times a week pot smokers, about 312. Daily pot smokers heading towards a half a second to react. Well, now you're in somebody's trunk and you had an accident, or you hit somebody, or you wrecked your car, or you got hurt, or whatever. So think about it. Here's a MRI of a person in an MRI machine tapping their finger. So you're in the dome, you're laying on your back, and you're just tapping your finger at your side. So here's a person finger tapping in an MRI. They send a signal from that movement memory part of the brain down your spine, out your arm, tap your finger. Here's a pot smoker, not under the influence of marijuana, but have all the THC in their brain tissue. Look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different parts of the brain have to relay that signal to different parts of the brain to be able to pull off something as simple as tapping your finger. This is fast. This is the way you learned it. This is now the roadblock, and it's much slower. This is 186 thousandths of a second reaction timing. This is 312.450. It slows down the ability to transmit a signal. So think about that. Canadian driving study, 1 joint of today's pot slows down your reaction time 41%. It's a Canadian in driving study. 2 joints slows down your reaction time by 2/3. Not a good drug to use when you're operating a motor vehicle. Fatal car crashes, 2010 to 2014, tripled. Researchers know increase in cases in women in all age groups. Washington State legalizes pot, 2016. Within a year, their fatality rate in driving accidents related to pot deaths doubles. And you know, by now it's probably tripled. So that's not a good, it's not a good drug for driving. Vaping, last topic, and we're out of here. People streaming are probably tired. How do you think I feel? When you combust even an aerosol or a liquid, there's all kinds of end products, and that's actually a time-lapse picture of a vape unit igniting. And I just say you've been warned. Think about this. We got into a project for NorCal firefighters. One of the leading causes of death, I think the major cause of death for firefighters is cancer, right? And heart disease too. And even using these respirators, which are incredible, they get these toxins in their bodies. You know, in the old days when a house burned, it was wood and nails, right? Now it's polystyrene and chemicals, and it's unbelievable what's even in wood, right, as it burns. So anyway, we found some studies where you could actually cut loose all these toxins in a person's body once they get in, and it's very difficult. And this guy in China, Dr. Yu, had figured out how you can actually get the fat to release the toxins and then get these toxins out of your system. And so we actually started an educational program for firefighters for NorCal, these guys who fight all these fires out in California. And what they found is that within these compounds that get in your system are heavy metals. And I can tell you this right now, they're in all of these vape oils and flavors, and you have no idea what's in this stuff. Many of them come from China and other places where there's no regulation. There's no regulation in the United States. The FDA has absolutely dropped the ball on letting millions of these devices out into the world, and everybody, there wasn't any scientific studies before they released them. So you know, besides the opioid crisis, it's another huge debacle. Heavy metals are environmental triggers for lots of things, but one of the worst ones is cancer. It sits deep in your lungs. It sits in your fat tissue in your body, and it's very hard to, once it's in there, to get it out. So it's an environmental trigger. It also, if you look at people who vape, if they vape in a car, your whole windshield and the windows in your car get this sticky film, almost like it looks like your windows are dirty inside the car, because in that exhale of that vape, you end up with this sticky residue. Well, what do you think it does in your lungs? At the point where you get CO2 out of your body or oxygen into your body, and your blood goes past and tries to actually pick up oxygen and release CO2, you have now coated that membrane with that sticky film. And I actually found a pretty interesting picture of deep in the lungs, these alveoli. This is pretty neat. Look at the blood cells. This is so cool. Look, you can see red blood cells right here. See them? And you're coating this oxygen transport system with this sticky film so that it can't absorb oxygen at the point of what we call gas exchange. And they can measure this in people. It's called PO2. It's a measurement of what percent of available oxygen in the atmosphere your body can take into your system. You know what they found, vape people? Very low PO2s. Lower than cigarette smokers. All right, so you think about that and then think it's not doing you harm. And if you ask people who vape, they'll tell you that they do have irritation and they do cough in the morning, just like smokers do. So think that that's not in some way harming your system. We don't have enough research. Here's again pictures of lung tissue and the blood-rich areas where you take oxygen into your system. Researchers found heavy metals in many of these aerosols, or the gases produced when they combust. If you look at this slide, Nanoparticles are known for penetrating deep into the respiratory system and reaching vulnerable sacs of the lungs. I just showed you a picture. It's an awesome picture of it. And you're going to put that sticky stuff in there and coat that area of your lungs, and some of that stuff is going to stay in there. So here, I can tell you this. The body will store many of these toxins in the CNS. Here's the ones we found with firefighters. This lady, Dr. Rita Elthorpe, was the one who directed the study. Look at the metals that were in what these firefighters were breathing in, right? These are all very toxic chemicals, even uranium, tungsten, tin. Chromium is one of the worst. I know a whole bunch about chromium. I grew up in a town that was all from the tanning industry, and that's, you know, so many people in that town died from cancer from chromium. So here you go. Here's the list. Here's the list. Here's what's in the harmless aerosol composition of these oils, fragrances, tasty things that kids are putting in their body. And then tell me that that's good to have in your body. I actually today put, here we got silver, nickel, tin. Here you got chromium, one of the highest cancer causes, aluminum, copper, cobalt, iron, zinc. I mean, this is what you're going to fill up your body with and think that that's good for you. All right? So I told the kids today, until we know, that's really not where you want to go. That's it. More research has to be done. It's being done right now. There's a ton of studies being done worldwide right now on this, because it's not just here where this is going on, it's everywhere. Last slide. I had a long day too. Ready for this? What you take in your body, your diet's is not just what you eat, it's what you watch, what you listen to, what you read, the people you hang around. Be mindful of the things you put in your body, emotionally, spiritually, physically. Remember? You want to be the best at what you are? Don't just train your body, train your mind, train your spirit. That's for any athlete, that's for anybody that wants to be anything of significance in anything. The guys who make it, physical, mental, spiritual, there's a side to all those things. Be careful what you take in. And I think we got right now a lot of people that need to get on that page. Adults and kids. And that's what we do, we educate. I mean, I'm not here trying to tell you what to do. I'm just saying, if you take some of this into consideration, here's what happens. You build healthy habits, your body responds. You stop doing the things that aren't good for you. Your body is amazing. It will actually heal. It will recoup. It'll recover. But the better scenario is that you don't do those things to yourself. And I look at young people and say, you know what? Some of it you're not going to recoup the whole deal. You start going down a path or a road and you get further and further and further from what you could have been, or from health or any other aspect of your life. And at some point in time you can turn around and go back to the beginning. But you may not get as far as you would have gotten if you had not taken that side route. So I would like to come back and share with your school district and spend time. You know, we had an hour today. That's great. I appreciate the hour. But like when you teach kids all the stuff you know about these topics separately, sleep, power back diet, nutrients, and you can help people. And pot and alcohol and stress. And I mean, these are things kids are facing at unprecedented levels today. We need to get on those pages, and that's what we do. So I appreciate being here. I hope you learned something and you maybe take some of this in consideration. We didn't even talk about the effect of technology on the brain. We got a huge program on that, about blue light and overstimulation of the brain from technology, and kids checking their phone average of once every 6 minutes every day, and that comes up to 150 times a day, and the neural fatigue that digs you, and there's so much. But thanks for being here. Third time doing it today, but tomorrow we do 2 more at another school, and let's help kids. Let's help them, first of all, be healthy and happy and grow up with some possibilities versus, winning's way down my list. Believe me, I had enough of that the first 20 years. So thanks for being here tonight, and thanks for tuning in. Appreciate it. Now, does anyone want to ask any questions? If you have to go, you can go, but if you want to ask any questions, I'll give you some short answers. Anybody? Yeah.
Do you have your athletes have supplements and things like that. What are your
We try to discourage as much as we can supplements. Again, unregulated industry, so much stuff mixed in with it that just isn't healthy. I think most state athletic associations have really discouraged supplements, and if you use any supplements, you certainly want to make sure that they're NSF certified, meaning that they're certified for Olympic sport. There's nothing harmful in it. They've done batch testing and studies. You won't test positive for any contaminants, and that's important because when you look at an industry like the supplement industry, you got these nitrous oxide expanders. You got stuff that's overstims like the heart. They've taken ephedras off the market, but there's new stuff coming all the time, and who knows who makes it and the mixtures aren't even batch controlled. I mean, you could have something that's weak, and you could have something a class action lawsuit in New York State right now against some of the major supplement suppliers where there was none of the supplement in the supplement. So they started testing stuff like you would buy, for instance, in a chain store, and they actually tested it, and there was none of this what was supposed to be in the substance. It was just all fillers and everything else. So, that's the safe one. But I mean, you have no idea of knowing. Just like with this the vaping, you have no idea of knowing. So why would you want to go there? Yeah, we discourage supplement use. How about kids start eating good foods that produce incredible amounts of energy compared to eating, Lucky Charms and candy bars and drinking energy drinks. Give your body better sources of energy. It produces more energy. We have diets. We have menus. We realize the kids aren't making meals. So what we did is we started making up. We actually took famous athletes' favorite foods. LeBron's miso salmon. I've got all kinds of cards with like what top athletes eat, and the best ones are very conscious of what they eat. They're not eating fast food ever. They just don't. They don't eat it. They'll go like, "Are you kidding me?" I actually did an all-day coaches clinic once. I get to the end of the day and some coach raises his hand. Here's his question: "Hey, if you want to eat fast food, like how many times could you eat it and get away with it?" I'm going like, "That's what you got out of today?" I said, "How about never?" When you just consider what's in it with sodium and fat, and they say the American diet today is 22 teaspoons of sugar, a half a cup of fat, and 2 teaspoons of salt. Is that going to help you? Man, I'll tell you, go live in another country for a couple weeks and start to see the changes you'll feel just in yourself from eating something that's not adulterated with all that. It's important. Power back diet's awesome, and it's for cognitive. It's about blood glucose levels, that your brain and muscles run off your blood glucose levels. That's not sugar, right? And it's got how you put on mass, how much protein you need when you're in this developmental phase of kids are filling out. You don't need to start taking a whole bunch of extra protein in if you're not mature enough to start to put on mass. Like a kid's a stick figure still. That's not, your bones are still growing, but you're not. You got all these kids using all these protein powders at that point in time. That's not good, and it's a stress on your body too. So, anybody else? Great. I appreciate you coming out tonight. Thank you, and I have some cards so you can look at our website. On our website, that's maximized too. We got 60,000 postings. It's been up for 20 years. So here's some cards up here. I'll leave them on the chair. And if you find a card that's not black, it's somebody else's, leave it for me because sometimes they get mixed in. But maybe give some feedback to the school or talk to some people who aren't here. Or, at the very least, I'll tell you this. I will give you. You can download off of our lifeofanathlete.us website. You can download the Power Back Diet, the sleep manual, and a lot of other documents. So start there. Sleep and nutrition. I mean, that's a lot of room for improvement, and we got a lot of kids who could be already up to another level if they would just change that. And so thanks for coming out. Appreciate it. Thank you. If you need more cards, then just let me know, and I have more in my bag here, my bag of tricks.